Step by step, the longest march can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly, none. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly, none. Welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor. We have been working to make a difference for the beauty of the earth and the freedom of her citizens since our founders organized to help break the cycle of human slavery in 1865. The same drive toward justice moves our current passion and practice. We welcome you, wherever you are in the world, whenever you are in the world. Join us for a time of discovery, recovery, celebration, lamentation, transformation, blessed quietness, and joyful noise. Together, our difference can be greater than anything we can do alone. So let us circle round for freedom. And let's begin the work again until freedom comes. Will you join us? The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another. May it be so.
The Undefeated by Kwame Alexander, illustrated by Kadir Nelson. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possible. The ones who survived America by any means necessary. And the ones who didn't. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith in the other. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision, who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop till the break of dawn. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. The righteous, marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved because Black lives matter." This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unlimited, unstoppable ones, the dreamers and doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land. the Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owenses, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys, and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken, but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for you, and you, and you. This is for us. I'm still feeling the impact of the virtual ensemble we heard earlier in the service. I'm marveling at how so many contributions, from a single note played on a handbell to melodic phrases sung by voices ranging from the deepest basses to the highest sopranos and everything in between, how each and every contribution to that choir made a difference in what it sounded like. And from the wealth of musical contributions, something beautiful and meaningful, magical and fulfilling happened. And while this is a new way of being in community as Chalice Singers, Chalice Bells, and Chalice Sparks, you all have, for quite some time now, been part of another sort of virtual choir, part of a community that individually contributes a small part to a larger vision. Every time you make a financial contribution to this community, you are reaffirming your belief in the work of this congregation and in Unitarian Universalist values. As with musical voices, your financial voice matters. It matters to the ongoing work of this congregation, to keep our ministries and programs strong at a time in this world when lives, and especially Black lives, very literally depend on our commitment to action. Your gift of any amount will be gratefully received. UUAA.org/giving. And I thank you for your generosity.
Who Am I? By Angela Davis. Who am I? I don't know. I know what I am, what labels others apply to me. I am human, or so they say. But tell me something. What is so humane about our species? Something found in no others. Something humane. I am lesbian. Yes, a lover of women. But I now choose very selectively. Though weary of trust, I am starved for love. I am a crone, old and withered by life. I feel so aged and weary at times. I am sickened by what I see that others do not. Even though I seldom see what is right in front of me. I am a child. I look about myself in wonder. Society constantly baffles my mind. I I find happiness in the small things in life. I have experienced so little, but seen so much. I still believe in love, so naive in matters of the heart. I am an author. I write many stories of loving, living, understanding, though I do not yet understand these things. I am a poet. At least that's what I am told. My pen hardly touches the paper, and I think of what's important in my heart. My feelings flow freely in verse, and sometimes not. I'm a pacifist. I abhor anger and violence. It destroys love, lives, and souls. I think there is always a peaceful solution if one is willing to search their heart and soul. Though it may be harder, let go of your pride and try. I am a survivor. Many battles I have faced. Somehow, I always come out of them, but never whole, for it is not that simple. Along the way, I have had to make sacrifices. But here I stand, in quiet defiance, and always will. Though I am tattered, battered, and occasionally shattered, who am I? I think above all, I am an individual.
Today's ritual and meditation begins with words from a presentation on centering theology, a conversation about faith, race, and liberation, given at General Assembly in 2018. Dr. Elias Ortega, the current president of Meadville Lombard Theological School, was one of the speakers. I'd like to invite you to engage with Dr. Ortega's words in a specific way today, and that is by intentionally moving from a more intellectual, in our heads focus to a more personal, contemplative focus. I'll guide you along the way, and we'll have moments of silence interspersed. Our first step is to read the text together. The words will be on the screen as I read them out loud. You may choose to just listen, to read along silently, or to read along out loud. In this step, we want to engage the text in a literal, intellectual way. Consider these questions. What is this text about? What images or phrases am I noticing? Read with me the words of Dr. Ortega. If we believe in collective salvation, we must also believe in collective sacrifice. It is powerful that our faith community is working to reclaim this sacred practice, and claiming what is meant to be sacred in personal sacrifice without the power of we is the very thing that desecrates the practice. That belief in collective salvation means there cannot be small groups of UUs whose personal sacrifice we depend on every time to move us forward as a collective whole. That kind of hierarchical membership undermines the very inherent worth and dignity that we lift in our first principle. Living into the power of we holds us accountable to repairing the legacy of theological harm we have perpetrated against some in our community. Even in the face of oppression, suffering, and the legacy of white supremacy culture in the world, we believe that there is a way forward. We aspire to transform and be transformed by love and justice. And to take a cue from disability justice activist Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasinha, who details how often we draw resources for resistance from systemic oppression. To affirm the power of we as a faith community, we need to strengthen ways for our people to draw nourishment and strength from this faith. We must fashion ourselves into a faithful people who draw wisdom from our inherited tradition. This is not an individual task, but a collective practice. As we move from head space to heart space, consider these questions as I read part of the text again. What do these words mean to me in my life right now? How does this text make me feel? What feelings might this text evoke for someone else, someone different from me? That belief in collective salvation means there cannot be small groups of UUs whose personal sacrifice we depend on every time to move us forward as a collective whole. That kind of hierarchical membership undermines the very inherent worth and dignity that we lift in our first principle. Living into the power of we holds us accountable to repairing the legacy of theological harm we have perpetrated against some in our community. Even in the face of oppression, suffering, and the legacy of white supremacy culture in the world, we believe that there is a way forward. Transformation requires a willingness to change, to let go of the fear of losing what is comfortable and safe. Consider these questions as I read part of the text again. What is being asked of me? What actions am I compelled to take now? We aspire to transform and be transformed by love and justice. To affirm the power of we as a faith community, we need to strengthen ways for our people to draw nourishment and strength from this faith. We must fashion ourselves into a faithful people who draw wisdom from our inherited tradition. This is not an individual task, but a collective practice. May this time spent together in sacred reading and contemplation leave us with a renewed commitment to the larger vision of justice and liberation for all. Not some, for all. May we have a renewed sense of our own individual responsibility in realizing the vision, and may we collectively act boldly and with conviction that the beloved community is within reach. May it be so.
What does a religion look like, sound like, feel like, that believes in the inherent worth and dignity of every person when so many people, for so long, have been silenced and erased? What does it feel like to conduct a free and responsible search for truth and meaning when that truth, which is so essential to claim, is also so painful? What is the humanism that aspires to the greater good of all humanity, yet has been complicit for so long in dehumanizing so many? To admit that one's faith, one's philosophy, evolved within a culture whose economic structures flourish because of the erasure of indigenous peoples and prosper because of the enslavement, villainization, and dehumanization of Black and brown bodies, a white supremacist culture. We must ask ourselves, how do I live my UU values, my humanist values? We must ask ourselves, what am I willing to do? What must we do to settle for nothing less than what our values call us to do? Liberate all. One way to do this is to center the ideas and words of marginalized populations. So why am I speaking? A white male. Because white people created the problem of systemic racist oppression, and therefore we must act to correct it. And the work's not easy. It's not going to be easy. It includes a complete accounting of our own sins, acceptance and acknowledgement of white culpability. It will take humility and sacrifice. In the words of the renowned author Ta-Nehisi Coates, what is needed is an airing of family secrets, a settling with old ghosts. What is needed is a healing of the American psyche and the banishment of white guilt. What I'm talking about is a national reckoning that would lead to spiritual renewal, end quote. This work, as hard as it may be, is also rewarding, uplifting, and absolutely joyful. This homily today is an invitation I invite all humanists, all UUs, and anyone who wants to join me to explore together how we can elevate humanity, how we can work together joyfully for the liberation of each and every human being. To start, we have to stop quibbling over language. So once and for all, what is white supremacy culture? Centering the words of those directly affected, I will share from the writings of Sir Lebert Jr., a member of our UUA Commission on Institutional Change, Sikivu Hutchinson, an American feminist, novelist, playwright, and director, and a humanist, and Dr. Anthony Pinn, professor of humanities and religious studies at Rice University, and a humanist as well. The following homily consists mostly of their words centered, not mine. Many terms evoke discomfort, and white supremacy culture is one such term. So why focus on white supremacy culture, on racism? Well, our first principle leads us to value the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and our second principle asserts the importance of equity. White supremacy is best understood as an ideology. It's the false assumption or belief that white people are supreme can be understood as the defining part of that ideology. And I'll add that belief exists both overtly and covertly, both consciously expressed and unconsciously manifested. And our first two principles definitely oppose this concept of white supremacy. The term white supremacy also has an image, for many, of neo-Nazi skinheads, of Confederate flags and swastikas, and other individualized expressions. But for others, more importantly, the term white supremacy culture describes fully, it describes the totality of race-based oppression in its ideological, interpersonal, institutional, internalized, and intersectional expressions. The term describes both the breadth and the depth of the impact in a way other terms, such as oppression or unconscious bias, simply do not. While we may not agree on every instance of terminology, we may and must reach a common agreement on history and process. I don't think any Unitarian Universalist or any humanist will deny we have a white supremacist history which modern society continues to support and benefit from. Let me list some specifics of this history. Many humanists who were abolitionists, they understood enslaved Africans as being human, but it was of a less significant kind. It was the base humanity that required freedom, but it wasn't a human status sufficient to also necessitate full citizenship and socioeconomic and political equality. Many humanists embrace Thomas Jefferson, and to embrace Thomas Jefferson as we do is to acknowledge at least a subtle connection to both a legacy of profound humanist thought and a legacy of profound humanist racism by a white man who owned slaves. Let's get even more specific about white supremacy culture today. No one will ever interrogate, brutalize, or execute a white humanist American for breathing, for walking, for driving, for wearing a bikini or sitting in a Starbucks while white. No one will ever revile white humanist America for being illegal, despite its centuries-long illegal occupation of indigenous lands. So will you admit with me that as much as separation of church and state is an important humanist issue that we have fought for centuries and we know so much about, framing the criminalization of youth of color, for instance, is also a humanist issue. It's a humanist imperative that has been ignored for too long because it's an accepted part of white supremacy culture. White supremacy culture is encrypted in de facto segregationist policies and practices. The overtly segregated spaces of Jim Crow, they've given way to the underfunded, under-resourced, and heavily policed schools, to the predatory lending policies that target Blacks and Latinx, the transit-dependent urban communities that are far away from job centers, non-unionized service worker jobs that don't pay a living wage. This is a legacy of a culture of whites as supreme. White supremacy culture, it's the assumption that the police are always there to serve and protect. It's the assumption that you weren't placed near the restroom in the restaurant because of skin color. It's the belief that you should be able to drive a luxury vehicle without assuming you're a drug dealer. Privilege allows for these assumptions or principles to be understood as givens. No one looks at a white person accused of a crime and assumes that's how all white Americans behave. But the same can't be said of people of color. That is our white supremacy culture. Racism, white supremacy culture. They're the cancer. And we can't cure a cancer if we focus all our time on what we're calling it. We can't cure a cancer if we also refuse to even admit it exists or to name it at all. So let's simply name it what it is so we can move on and direct all our attention toward curing it. We have to destigmatize the terms white supremacy culture and racist. So when someone makes the accusation against us, we'll say confidently that yes, absolutely. Of course, I understand and I accept that I am part of a cancer-ridden society. And I must accept it because only with that understanding and acceptance am I able to be part of the cure, to fill the prescription. Now, this sermon is specifically addressing anti-racism and white supremacy culture through a humanistic lens. And I stand here today as a humanist that does accept that I live in a white supremacy culture and that I am racist. Yes, that is what I said, because I must in order to move on. I mean, it's not who I am. It doesn't define me, but it is what I am, at least part of me, because of the condition of my birth. I stand here knowing that without that acceptance, I can't move on to honestly and holistically change the state of things. Dr. Pinn says, to omit attention to modes of social justice like racism is to reduce the connotation of the human in humanism. Furthermore, it is to truncate the challenges confronting human well-being in the contemporary world. I'd like to repeat here, 90% of these words and thoughts are centering the voices of people of color. They are direct quotes from Sikivu Hutchinson and Dr. Anthony Pinn. They're not my words. The Humanist Study Group at First U in Ann Arbor recently updated their foundation document. Well, today, let me ask that we open up space to rethink our commitments. Some of the points in this document include providing knowledge about humanist ideas and behaviors, as well as a history of humanism. Let me challenge us to explore together the ideas and behaviors and history of humanists of color, often overlooked. The HSG wants to support humanists being unjustly marginalized. Let me challenge you to consider humanists of color that have been marginalized for generations and continue to be. The responsible search for truth and meaning, so important to the humanist sensibility, requires that we search for all truth, even the very difficult truths, too long ignored or concealed. We humanists, we prize critical thinking and questioning and reason and learning and logic. And racism, fighting racism, necessitates learning and acting as well in ways that acknowledge the structures of privilege and race in the United States. We have to commit to that learning as much as we commit to knowing about separation of church and state or evolution or scientific advancements, other issues that mark the bulk of mainstream humanist thought. So join me in the coming months in an adult study group I will host. Beginning in October, you can ask your congregation about the details. I'll read, we'll listen to, we'll view, we'll discuss the thoughts and ideas exclusively of humanists of color. Let's explore together how humanism is relevant to the lived experiences of people of color. What does Black humanist cultural production in academic scholarship, entertainment, and literature look like? How is humanism relevant under conditions of economic injustice and capitalism? Let's read and let's listen to Dr. Anthony Pinn, to Mandisa Thomas, Bridget Crutchfield, Sincere Kirabo, Candace Gorham, Ashton Woods, so many more humanists of color. I'll conclude this homily by asking you to make some vows with me here today. I'll ask you to express the phrase, I will. You're at home. No one has to hear you or see you. I asked at the beginning of this, what does it feel like? What does it sound like? What does it look like to do this work? And this is a chance for you to test out how that commitment feels. Try it on in your body, in your voice, in your mind. Sense yourself expressing, I will. Examine how you feel when you say it or when you sign it or when you think it or however you express it. And then do it again. And feel any hurt that you do feel, any difficulty, any pain that's there. Accept that those things will be there. Just test out your own claim of culpability. Try it on, your own diagnosis of the cancer, your own desire to fill the prescription. And feel the relief that that brings, the motivation that that instills, and the joy in saying it. Express it stronger. I will, and stronger. I will. I will. I will. I will. I will. Until you're embracing the extreme jubilation in the claim that I will move forward to do whatever it takes to truly liberate humanity. Will you expose privilege, what is unearned, and create space for doing something as a next step? I will. Will you acknowledge and contextualize white supremacy and make this acknowledgement central to the missions and claims of your organizations as you have begun to do? I will. Will you read, learn, listen to, and center the ideas of Black, Indigenous, and people of color? I will. Will you leave the exploration of the white man's perspective, already quite thoroughly undertaken, and explore with me what is womanist humanism, for instance, the history and experience of women of color? I will. Will you enlarge the focus of humanism with me by focusing on interlocking oppression in education, healthcare, housing, and criminal justice, while deferring to the voices, leadership, and lived experiences of humanists of color, of people of color? I will. Will you follow the lead of racial minorities and other marginalized populations, including locally impacted communities, as you've started to do already, by forging ongoing direct relationships with those communities for grounding and guiding justice work? I will. Will you accept that sacrifice is necessary, that one cannot be both comfortable and a catalyst for change? Will you accept that this work is difficult, but also joyful? I will. Will you commit to doing this work by implementing the recommendations in Widening the Circle of Concern, the report from the UUAA Commission on Institutional Change? I will. Will you commit to the work outlined in First Use Vision 2050 work, the Humanist Study Group's foundational documents, the missions of Northwest and other UU congregations, and the Unitarian Universalist Association? I will. Will you commit to joining me in anti-racism work, in this blessed work that our values lead us to do?
I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. Woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Everybody say, I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind, and it was stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm on my way to the freedom line. To the freedom line. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom line. To the freedom line. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom line. To the freedom line. I'm on my way. I'm on my way. God, I'm on my way. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom. To the freedom line. I'm on my way. I'm on my way to the freedom. To the freedom line. I'm on my way to the freedom line. I'm on my way. Great God, I'm on my way. So come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go to that land.
me to that land where I'm bound. Come with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come with me to that land. The freedom was staying on that. I'm on my way with me to that land. With it all staying on. I'm on my way with me to that land. To the freedom was staying on that. I'm on my way to that land. With my
Shakti, La Madre, Mother of Us All, by Reverend Manish, Mishra-Marzetti. Shakti, La Madre, Mother of Us All, be with me in this groundless ground of being. One foot firmly on the earth, touching you, the other hovering, not quite here, not quite there. This in-between time, both open and maddening in its lack of surety. How do I leave behind the pain, the disappointment, the anger at what has been, the unconscious cruelty, the negating, the selfish harm that I have walked through, knowing the possibility always exists that it could happen again. Something in me called forth the experiences I have had, experiences I have needed in order to learn and grow, in order to see myself more clearly, to see you more clearly. And yet, the pain and not feeling cared for or valued, it runs so deep. The pain persists. Help me, Mama, to be vigilant that I never treat others in this way, that I can see clearly enough to recognize when violence may be happening at my behest or in my community, striving to always transform such energy and then use that energy in service to building, to creating the great love and hope we all need. Perhaps this is why any of us suffer. to mine the depths of experience so that we can then, at our best, be an ally, a friend, a companion, an agent of change, working to transform and heal brokenness whenever and wherever it may appear. Perhaps the ground of being I seek is in knowing the solidity of who I am, what I care about, and what I will stand for in service to, in relationship with,